Hello, I'm Paul from Wayfinding.com, and I'm going to talk about 10 of the most common mistakes that people make when designing a wayfinding system. So let's get into it. Decision points are very important, and as you can see from this diagram, the signage is out of the line of sight for the person walking, and this is really no good. The signage needs to be in the correct position, and in this diagram coming up right now, you can see that as they're walking towards the sign, they have time to make the correct decision, and this is really the way signage needs to be. You need to have the signage in the right decision points. The use of space is very important as well in wayfinding. Sometimes you just do not need to use signage, sometimes you do, but the use of space is very, very important, and sometimes the main walkways and the main directions can be naturally obvious from the use of space. This is a great picture because you can see from the aerial view how they've used space to guide people and how the paths naturally guide people. So when we talk about clustering, this is a great example from actually a bus coach station. But you can see that there's so many different types of signage, the welcome signage, but the parking signage. It's just cluttered, and there shouldn't be that much information in one area. And in this picture coming up now, this is a typical piece of signage that you might see in any airport in the world. And I don't know if you can see the mistakes, but there are two mistakes that I'm going to point out right now. One of them is owls pointing into the text. This is not a good idea because it makes it harder for people to digest subconsciously. The owl should be pointing away from the text. So if you look at the departures or the information point text, the owl should be on the right side of those two terms. Another problem here is that terms on the sign are wrongly grouped together. Toilets and baby changing, for example, refer to the same type of facility, so they should be consecutively listed together. So even with this kind of signage, there's an easy chance that you can make a mistake. So care should really be paid to this type of thing. Another classic problem that I'm going to show you now is not maintaining signage. And I think from these pictures that you're seeing right now, it's quite obvious that with a little care, little attention, the wayfinding system could be a huge amount clearer. I mean, these three signs, they are quite amusing in a way, but they need to be maintained. One of the most valuable resources when you're planning a wayfinding system are the staff and the people who work in the location that you're designing for. If you talk to staff, they will very often get asked the same questions day in, day out about where can I find this, where can I find that. And so by asking your staff, you can really zone in on the problems of the system, and very often people forget to do this. So make use of the human resources, make use of your staff, and make sure you evaluate the problems that already exist in the system. Another common problem is not having a signage hierarchy planned and in existence. So really, if you can plan what are the most important signs of intermediate importance and lower importance, then you can begin to really understand how to sign an environment such as an airport. So you don't need to, for example, promote where the shops and restaurants are at every point in the airport. You can wait until they're through security, and you may not even need to sign the shops and restaurants because they will automatically visually see those things. So, but for departure gates or for security, they would have a higher importance. So you need to be able to guide people through those key areas. So really, you need to start planning what are the most important, the intermediate, and the lower important signage items. When it comes to thinking about all user types, then we need to think about disabled people, people traveling with children, the elderly. There are so many different user types that we need to consider, and the idea of special assistance, it can cater for a very wide variety of user types. And we need to realize, for example, that somebody in a wheelchair, they may enter the main terminal and they may not be looking for, first of all, to check in. What they may be looking for is the special assistance desk. So even when you're signing a main terminal, you need the special assistance to be visible or at least easy to find. Not everyone will be immediately going and taking the same routes. So we need to think very, very carefully about all of these different user types. You should actually have a checklist for disabled travelers, for people traveling with children. Have different checklists so that when you audit the airport or whatever type of travel space that you're dealing with, that you actually do an audit for every single one of these different user types, so that you can make sure that you have a really efficient system in place. Another problem that people can make is mixing different types of signage. It's very common in Italy, and you often see road signage, which, for given directions, mixed up with restaurant information, hotel information. So it can be really, really confusing when you've got like 10 or 20 pieces of signage all plastered together, and it's almost impossible to read as you're driving by. This isn't such a problem in airports and in other locations, but just watch out for mixing different types of signage, because it's best avoided. And finally, the 10th issue that I'm going to raise today is using the wrong solutions at the wrong time in wayfinding. So in this example, using lighting can be a really, really good idea, but the times it's mostly going to be busy in this theatre example, on the steps, it's going to be full of people, so the likelihood that people will be able to read this text is quite low. So this maybe isn't the right solution. Perhaps it does help some people, but the more important thing is to just consider the different options, the different tools that you can use for wayfinding. In this example, the signage is going to be difficult to read if someone is sat on that far right seat. So really something, whether it's the position or whether it's the actual signage or the solution used, just make sure to pay attention to these things. So think carefully if you need electronic signage, because sometimes you don't. Sometimes a simple piece of signage can be more than suitable. So just think about the different solutions and pay attention to that. Thank you for watching that. I hope that some of the tips were useful. I know they're quite basic, but in future videos, I'm going to go into more detail and more technical ideas and points. But that's not a bad start, I hope. So I hope you subscribe and talk to you again soon. Thank you.